Never thought much about what an artist is or isn't, but I just started making art. You know, I'd always make things. My dad was he liked to do carpentry and building and welding. He was a welder himself, so there's always material around the house, and I was always building things. So growing up, it was sort of like this natural thing. It wasn't art, it was just making stuff. And that's sort of what I do now. I just make stuff. I came from the Midwest, from the Michigan, Chicago area. That's where I grew up. And it was an interesting place to grow up, right on Lake Michigan, and being influenced by big city, even though it was a small town just like this town. And all my relatives, my family was middle class, factory workers. There was no artists or anything like that in my family, except my aunt, who lived in Chicago, and she didn't have any children, but she had a home near us, summer home, and she would take my brother and I on vacation, like out to California, to Florida, and that's where I first experienced art. You know, she took us to museums, and I was like, as a 12-year-old kid, looking at these fabulous things, you know, like out in Oregon or California, and I never thought much about what an artist is or isn't, but I just started making art. So it wasn't really until undergraduate school in Michigan. I went to Western Michigan University for my undergraduate work, and I studied graphic design and painting. I did those two things. And once I graduated, I moved to Chicago, and I worked in an advertising agency, and I also had a studio where I painted, and I was doing quite well as a painter, and I was showing in galleries, and we had a business. A little later, I moved to Indiana, South Bend, Indiana, and had a business there. And then there's events happened in the mid-'80s, and I moved out East Coast, because I got a job out here working in design. And ultimately, I hated working for a corporation. But it did give me enough money, quite a bit of money, to move to New York City and go to graduate school at School of Visual Arts. So once I studied there and graduated, I felt validated as an artist. I felt like, all right, now I'm officially an artist because I've got my MFA, and I started teaching. I didn't want to go back to a corporation, so I started teaching at universities, and ultimately got a full-time teaching gig, which I've been doing now for 30 years. And but it was probably around 25 years ago that I've always had this hankering to do sculpture, and I mostly didn't do it because I didn't have a place that was sort of permanent to start working in. But then I bought a house, and I had enough property, and I started welding. I took a class, learned how to do it, and then I started making sculptures. And then I've been fortunate because the work was well received, and that's how it happened. That's why this is here. I usually don't plan my sculptures. I mean, I know a lot of people will, you know, spend hours really contemplating, but my graphic design background is such that I think of these works, all my sculptures, as sort of design pieces more than anything. So design in space. So a lot of times I'll have parts laying around my studio, and like in the corner of my eye, I'll see something, and it's like, oh yeah, that could be a piece. And then I start making a piece out of that, or then I'll do drawings, or sometimes I use CAD, or sometimes I make little models, just to give me a sense of what it will look like, you know, large. But usually it's just a process of assembling as I'm going along. Now this particular piece, there's 3 of them I had using this particular shape. The first one I made is called Shapeshifter, And what was interesting about that piece is as you walked around, it looked whole, but as you walked around, it looked like it shifted, the shape completely changed. And I really liked that idea, that it almost had a kinetic feel to it without actually being kinetic. So then I did another piece that had similar forms, completely different sculpture, but still within that vein. And then I made this piece with the same idea, because I had leftover parts. See, that was the only reason, because I had like 3 or 4 of these left over from the other project. I thought, oh, I gotta do something with that. So I started making this, and I tend to use a lot of spherical shapes. Somehow that sort of pulls things together. So as I was composing this piece, I originally had the 3 at the bottom, and then, which was actually part of a different sculpture. And then I thought, well, okay, if I start adding things on and then doing little drawings, and then it just came together. So that's how we got there. But that's usually the process in general, is just, you know, I change things as I see it, and you know, there's a certain amount of balance and a dynamic aspect to it, and because of my painting background, I tend to use a lot of color. I like sort of the natural steel look, but every time I say I'm going to just leave the piece natural, then I instantly go and start painting it. So, because I like the colors, but so that's how that goes. I really want to try other colors, and I'll paint like purples or greens and stuff, and then they end up doing primary colors. I don't know, it's just like, it's I don't know. I like the ultimate. I mean, they do use other colors, but usually it ends up being black, white, red, yellow, and blue, or something like that. This is my work area, where I'm currently working on a new sculpture. This is a maquette of the piece that I'm currently going to make, and over here I have some of the parts of the new sculpture. I'm going to demonstrate to you a little bit of what I go through when I'm making these pieces. And in this particular case, I have 4 pieces clamped together, which I'm going to try to even out so they all look the same. It's these particular fins that are right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind some of the edges and give you an example of what I do. So let me get my gloves on, and I will put take my grinder and give you a demonstration. I do pretty much everything. Like I said earlier, I make stuff. So I tell this to my students too. It's like, I really admire artists that have one focus, and that's the thing they do. And they're a painter, or they're whatever, ceramicist, and they do that thing, and they're perfectionists on that. And it's, I'm not that way. I do something like this, and then I see something else, I start doing that. I got paintings going, I got drawings going, I'm working on the computer, I get tired of that, I go build something, garden then, and it's like, I see it all as one thing, it's all art. So I don't really think like, oh gee, I'm a sculptor, which I am, but I do that more now than I do other things. But last week I had to do design poster. I had designed a poster for school, and so I worked on the computer, did all that, and that was fine. Typography and all, and imagery and illustrating, all that is interesting to me too, and I do that too. So I guess I'm the jack of all trades and the master of none. So there you go. And that's okay with me. I'm fine with that. I have to build these sculptures in such a way that I can actually move them myself. And sometimes they get really heavy and big, and a particular one I have right now up in Vermont, I use 1/2 inch steel for some reason. I don't know why. And it was so heavy that after I had the whole thing together, I tried to move it out of my studio. I couldn't even lift it. There's no way of getting it. I had to cut it all apart, and then, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So even though this looks, fairly good size, I can't get much bigger without actually having some sort of machinery to move these things. So if I do, well, a lot of times I'll fabricate, so they have volume and shape, but they're hollow. So they look like they're big and heavy, but they're actually, fairly light. And height is another problem, because I have a gantry in my studio that's only 12 feet tall, so I can only go so high, and that's it. The thing lifts it up, so, but that's okay. I would think just to keep at it. Don't, couple things I would think, really. One is to persevere. Keep working at it. Don't be discouraged, and don't look at other people's work, or let me back up. It's not that you don't look at other people's, don't compare yourself to other people. There's always someone better than you, and there's always someone worse than you. You're always right where you should be, but you got to keep working at it. If you really want to be a successful artist, it's not the work so much, it's your work ethic. It's the fact that every day you go and you go to this spot, you go to your studio, even if you're not actually physically doing it, just going there and sitting there and thinking about it is important, is work, actually. I mean, driving here, I'm working out stuff in my head. I can't wait to get home because I got to finish the sculpture, right? So I'm thinking about, I got to do this. That's working. That's like being in the studio. So that's what you got to do. Now, if you're a person who wants to be an artist, but you never do it, and I tell this to my students all the time, actually. It's like, pretending or dreaming about it or something, that's not going to help. You're not going to be an artist. You're going to be an artist by doing. So I think that was the advice I was given, and I adhere to that till this day.